So our first presenter, after living in New York, Florida, Minneapolis, and Chicago, she landed in C-U in 1996 and never left. She resides in Urbana with her husband, daughter, cats, neighbors, and a big backyard. She is Lisa Bralts-Kelly.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bralts-Kelly. Some of you may know me from what is often referred to as my natural habitat, which is Urbana's Market at the Square, Urbana's Saturday Farmers Market. I love my job, but it's only indirectly related to what I'm here to talk to you about tonight, which is why and how I tell Champaign-Urbana's local food stories on the radio. A little backstory first. Most kids love the sound of their own voices, and I, obviously, was no exception. If you're old like me, you'll remember those so-called portable tape recorders with the attached microphone. I took one everywhere with me when I was a kid, but I also loved to write. I really identified with Harriet the Spy, who wrote stories about her neighborhood with mixed results. So fast forward a few years, I end up on the radio as a volunteer DJ in college and on a couple community radio stations for a while. But about 10 years ago, I developed an interest in home and kitchen economics, growing, cooking, and preserving food. Sometimes I wrote about this stuff, but I really miss being on the air. If only someone was interested in putting local food stories on the air. In March 2010, out of nowhere, WILL's Dave Dickey asked me if I would be interested in putting local food stories on the radio. I would write and voice and record the pieces, and they would take care of the rest. Was I interested? Yes. Armed with a higher tech version of my childhood tape recorder, I was often wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I'd never really written for radio before. Deadlines still are and always have been a problem for me. And I didn't know if anyone from apart from my friends would listen to the stories that I wanted to tell about gardens, baking, dinner with friends. But I jumped in anyway, and In My Backyard was born. The first place I look for stories, and the first place that I would recommend anybody look for stories, is in their own kitchen. Learning how to make something from scratch, bread for example, can be a revolutionary, life-altering act. The best way to get over something being intimidating is to get in there and kick its ass, even if it's yeast. Another place I'd suggest is your garden, or friends if you don't have one. Raising and not killing your first crop of tomatoes is totally empowering, and it's your story. Eventually, moving on to more exotic stuff like asparagus makes you feel like Mother Earth when it comes up, even if it's the weirdest looking thing you've ever seen. Then there are your friends and neighbors. I looked around and found people I actually knew, growing hops for beer in Champaign, building chicken fortresses in Urbana, hosting tomato canning parties, all kinds of stuff. What fascinates me about these situations and these people is that they've moved beyond bread, beyond asparagus, and they're all just regular people, except for my neighbor Jill, who is currently converting an old dishwasher into a meat smoker on her back patio. The great part about finding these people and getting their stories is that they're willing to share their knowledge and experiences, of course, but also their beer, their eggs, their tomato sauces, and their home-smoked kielbasa. But there are also the people who've moved out of the backyard and into food production for other people. The folks at Wolf Orchard in Monticello, Ron and Hope, they grow beautiful heirloom apples with names most of us have never heard of. After lives working in nursing and agronomy for chemical companies, hundreds of fruit trees are their retirement project. Lisa Haynes owns a certified organic produce and livestock farm out in Mahomet, Illinois. She threw in the towel on her previous career so she could do things like grow her farm from 7 acres to 40, raise a family with her partner, run a marathon or two. Her previous career, she was going to be a nuclear engineer, but she chose dirt instead. I also like food projects that encourage involvement from people in the larger community, getting people of like interests together to create something that would otherwise take forever. The currently dormant Prairie Sugar Collective was one such project. Many hands made slightly lighter work of collecting sap from local maple trees and making syrup. Another example of a food project that I love is Block by Block's annual seed swap. Right at that part of the winter when you think spring will never come, like that first week of February, that's when the seed swap happens. The people who come together are really energized by this idea, and it encourages further participation on every level, from novice to expert. Finally, I like looking at stories that involve the local food economy. The vast majority of the food that we eat here comes from somewhere else, which is why I love the story of the University of Illinois Sustainable Student Farm. They grow for the university dining services and sell what they don't give to them on the quad, all on less than 5 acres. Supporting local farms supports the local food economy, and some farms give you multiple opportunities to do that. Prairie Fruits Farm is one of those farms. They have their cheese in stores and at markets, and you can access their farm through their farm dinners, but they also open their farm in the spring to anybody who wants to come to pet goats, eat breakfast, and buy some cheese. So why tell these stories? It turns out that people like hearing about things that happen below the radar. They like unusual perspectives. Bean-to-bar chocolate in central Illinois, crazy idea, right? But Daniel Schreiber's Flatlander chocolate was a great local food story. He passed away last year, but his curiosity and his enthusiasm have really inspired me to find others like him. And why the radio? Well, in our highly visual, social media-driven culture, it's a relief to hear voices and leave something to the imagination. Radio is like most other media. It can be portable, it can be on demand, but who doesn't like being surprised by a good story on the radio while you're making dinner or hanging out with your family? In the case of In My Backyard segments, local food is the story because we all eat, and we all live somewhere. We live here in Illinois. Every activity and every story I mentioned is driven in some way by how the seasons manifest here. And with the increasing concerns over resource depletion, telling people their local food stories is really important. Stories about our food and where it comes from, backyard, neighbor's yard, the farm, can inspire and educate us and bring our communities together in unexpected ways. Stories can motivate a listener's changes in eating habits or get people paging through a seed catalog. It's really about engagement with stories, with food, and with each other. I tell these stories because I love food, I love radio, and I love telling stories about the doings of my neighborhood and yours, just like Harriet the Spy. And like Harriet, I've learned over the course of 37 segments that I have a lot to learn and fears to overcome, especially those involving squash. This is Lisa Bralts-Kelly for In My Backyard. Thank you.